So my name's Sean, I'm Head of Brand and Marketing, and we are KidsKnowBest. So we are a full-service research and marketing agency, and I'll give you a bit of our background, so how we came about really. So back in 2016, one of our co-founders was looking after his daughters in the summer holidays, and it was raining, obviously, British weather. And the only option he had to entertain them was to take them to the cinema. Now, the only kids' film that was on in the press the only kids' film that was on in the cinema at that time had been absolutely panned by the critics in the press. He had to take them anyway, he needed to get out of the house, and his girls absolutely loved it. So he came away from that experience with this kind of light bulb moment. Why are middle-aged people reviewing things for kids? You know, where is kids' voice in all of this? And we've been on a mission ever since to give kids a voice in order to help them better connect with brands. So the focus of today's talk is around Gen Alpha. So Gen Alpha are those born between 2010 and 2024. So the oldest of the cohort are now 14, and the youngest will be born this year. It's estimated around 2.1 million kids are born into Gen Alpha each month, not each year, but they are still predicted to be the biggest generation ever in global history, which is probably why there's a lot being said about them right now, and they seem to be the hot topic. But as you can see from this chart, that not everything that's being said about them out there is all that nice. So the red line there indicates negative sentiment around the search term Gen Alpha. I think the funniest trope that I've seen out there at the moment around Gen Alpha is the comparison to the honey badger. Now, I think it was meant as a bit of a backhanded compliment in that, you know, they're confident, they speak their mind, but as you can see from that picture there, they're quite aggressive looking little creatures. I don't know if any of you actually had the privilege of seeing our little stunt outside yesterday. We actually got one of the kids, a kid from Gen Alpha, he's an actor, but he was dressed up as an old school paper boy, and he was reading some of the headlines that have been out there around Gen Alpha recently, and giving you guys what for, you know, kind of dispelling some of the myths, and I guess giving a counter argument from the voice of youth. So what we wanted to do today is show you some of those headlines and a few more opinions from kids about them. Hopefully it works. Here we go.
They don't remember how it was like when they were kids. Who's the one who helps you when the TV doesn't work?
That not all teenagers are boring and grumpy.
Guys don't treat us in the way that we need to be treated.
We can be calm whenever we want to, but we just choose to be crazy because why not? We won't get in trouble. We're kids.
Adults just don't understand how amazing kids could be in certain situations.
I think if you're gonna make a film or you want to make art, I think it's just better to come from a person because they've got actual emotions and then they can put different things related to them into their work.
Why are certain bodies for certain activities romanticized? Why are people okay with it being for everyone, and why is it so difficult to do the things that you want to do when you look different?
For the last 20 years, streaming's come into it, and, people are making money. They just sit there, laughing and stuff. And I feel especially with parents nowadays, especially parents in their 40s, 50s, they didn't have that back then. I feel if their kid wants to push to do that, they need to realize that this is the new thing and their kids can actually do it.
Some adults don't really have the time to listen to kids, but when you do KidsKnowBest, you can actually listen and understand what you're doing. I'm think it's actually kind of cool.
I think it's a really good thing. You get to just basically talk about what you do. Let's talk about your opinions and stuff.
As a young person, I get to share my thoughts and views on today's society.
It's a pretty cool thing because you have somebody to share your thoughts with, which sometimes you overlook.
I've switched mics, so hopefully this sounds a bit better. So there are some kids from our community. So we actually speak to thousands of kids across the UK and the US between the ages of 3 to 18. And we speak to them in both a quantitative sense and qual. So in terms of the quant side of things, we run surveys, buzz polls, that kind of thing, to kind of find out what's going on. And then we have those one-to-one interviews with the kids to actually find out the why. And all of that kind of helps us feed that back to brands to help them better connect with this audience. So why does listening matter for brands? So we know why the kids like being heard. I'll show you on this next slide. Kids have a huge influence on household spending. So aside from kind of, their personal interests, what they're spending their pocket money on, they do impact family spending decisions as well. So everything from, family days out, the tech that the family use, what restaurant they go to, which takeaway they have, SVOD subscriptions, kids heavily influence that decision. So it is actually really important what they think about your brand. And with that, I'm going to show you, we asked some kids what they thought about brands. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Thinking about it, Cheryl should have no interest in game.
All she spoke about was like confidence and how confident she feels in makeup. But like, what's that saying to the people who don't wear makeup, that they shouldn't be confident with not wearing it? I could like understand if people who make sportswear did that, and about how like confident you should feel in sportswear.
First of all, I'm not sure if Drunk Elephant is supposed to be for 5-year-olds.
Gaming brands like EA and Activision, they just thrive on like user purchases, like in-game purchases and stuff like that. So sometimes they end up not caring about their own game and they're just wanting money. And I think that's just when it becomes kind of like ridiculous, and they just like completely stop listening to the fan base.
I'm not the biggest fan of Pride. Actually, I don't think it's a very good drink. Maybe they just like Logan Paul and KSI, and they just think, oh, I like these people, so I'm just going to buy it to make myself look good. Maybe, I'm not sure.
I think Lego is a brand that understands kids. One that captures kids and understands kids well is Lego, because it makes good things that kids like. So like kids like Star Wars movies, and Lego make Lego Star Wars.
I think that NetherRealm Games really like listen to their fan base, and they do what's asked. Like, for example, people suggested like having Homelander in Mortal Kombat 1, and then they delivered and they did that.
Why I love Nike so much is because I love their variety of shoes.
A few small businesses that are starting to make ones that like represent different people. Duolingo, like people do like, funny posts and like memes about Duolingo, and rather than kind of just ignoring it, Duolingo kind of praises it.
I also like Sol de Janeiro because I like the smell of their body sprays, and I like the interesting packaging and how each spray, instead of having a name, it has a number. I think that makes it really cool.
Cool. So what we wanted to do is then unpack some of our kind of key themes and findings from those conversations with kids. In terms of how kids speak about brands, it's, from two very distinct lenses. So on the one side is very much about the product or service, and then the other side is the way that the brand communicates with them. So when we start to think about kind of the product experience, aesthetics and practicality is really important to them. So in terms of kind of, both style and substance. So we saw that from that girl who spoke about Prime. So she was able to articulate that her and her friends had kind of bought into the coolness of the ambassadors kind of behind it. But when she thought about the taste of the product, she said it wasn't really great. So she's not going to waste her money buying it again. And I think you can see that reflected now. I don't know if any of you have been following what's been going on with Prime, but they've upped their distribution, shares are going down. So yeah, it just kind of shows that if you don't listen, this is kind of what can happen. Another thing that was spoken about was variety. So kids absolutely love choice. They're very inclusive, so they want to see stuff for everybody. But with that comes this concept of decision fatigue. So by that, what we mean there is we've had so many conversations with kids where they talk about their algorithm serving them so well. So in terms of like their experiences, you know, they tune into Netflix. They don't even have to think about what they want to watch because the algorithm already knows them and gives them really personalized recommendations. And they're kind of expecting that now beyond kind of those digital touch points in kind of all aspects of their life. So one example a kid gave about Nike actually was that on their website, really simple kind of quiz style thing where you say what sport you play, then it will ask you, you know, hockey or football. Do you play on AstroTurf or do you play on grass? And it helped him whittle down the decision. So that's something, you know, making that user experience for kids super simple to kind of take out that decision fatigue and make, you know, purchase decisions really easy. Something that came out really, really strongly, I was mentioned time and time again, and obviously we could only fit a few clips into 2 minutes, but yeah, contextual appropriateness. So I could say authentic here, but I do think that that's a term that is bandied around a lot in our industry. So I really wanted to unpack what that meant for kids. So the idea of contextual appropriateness, that there was a reference there from a girl who was talking about a campaign that she had seen, was actually a beauty brand, and they had partnered with a sports ambassador, so a female athlete. I won't name the brand. But essentially, the message that she got from that was, when you wear makeup, you play sports better. And that 11-year-old girl was just like, I'm not having it. Like, I don't want to be, you know, sold these messages and like have, you know, unrealistic beauty standards kind of pushed upon me from such a young age. And she went on to say, you know, if it was a sports brand like JD, you know, if they're creating products that enhance your performance, then yeah, great. That feels authentic for a sports brand to be doing that kind of campaign, I guess. So I guess if brands try and do anything contrived, you know, if they try and play in spaces where it doesn't feel real to the kids, it's just not going to resonate. The other thing, so diverse representation, kind of obvious, but kids are calling out for it. They're still not seeing it. And that sort of feeds into this idea of relatability, and also kind of connection with brands. And then this concept of responsiveness. So this is kind of why we're here today. It's all about listening, but kids actually want to see what you're going to give back to them as well. So it's not kind of just this one-way thing of thanks for your feedback, but what are you actually going to do? What is the action off the back of that? So that's something that's really important to them. So in terms of brands getting it right, here's a snapshot. So we surveyed 600 kids, so we gave them 101 options to pick from. And as you'll see, Nike and Amazon came out top. So it is a pleasure for me to bring up Anil Ramjiani today. So he's from Nike. He is an athlete partnerships director, previously worked at Adidas and is a teen athlete and triathlete himself, so has a passion for getting the next generation into sport. So welcome to the stage, Anil.
There we go. It's great to be here with each of you. So as Sean mentioned, I think listening is absolutely critical. And when you listen to your consumer, you truly do develop a deep connection with them. And so the work I do, I work with our global football athletes at Nike, and before that with Adidas. And the reason why it's so powerful is athletes are the everyday superhero for Gen Alpha, or as I like to refer to them as our future athletes. And why is that? Well, athletes are unique, they're relatable, they're inspiring, they're the role models for Gen Alpha. So when they partner with brands, it's really important that the product, the messaging, and the athlete really come together in an authentic way, because as you pointed out, Gen Alpha can call the BS. They're heavily opinionated. So what I'd like to do today is just share a few examples with you of why this is so important to listen, create that authentic connection, and be responsive. That's all right. So, seeing is believing. I'm sure many of you in the room recognize this young man. The good news is he organized his transfer earlier this week, just in time for YMS, so thanks, mate, for that. But the reason why Mbappe is such a vision for so many kids is twofold. One, dreaming. Kids dream big. And if you think about this young man and who is his role model, how big he dreamed and what he's achieved, it just tells us how Gen Alpha, those future athletes, have their own vision, their own dreams that we have to make sure we listen to and they don't fall upon deaf ears. The second thing I'd love for you to take away are insights. Now, after World Cup 22, I partnered with KKB and they shared some insights with me, which I found quite fascinating. They surveyed kids across Europe, across 4 attributes, and they found that France, his home country, rated him highly across all 4. But the other 4 countries had a completely different perspective. So you can tell as he moves to Spain, what is his perception going to be and how authentic, how inspiring will he be for a broader global audience. But now, let's talk about girls in sports. Now, this is such an amazing opportunity in space. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the Dove self-esteem campaign. Raise your hand if you've heard about it. All right, nice one. Cool. If you haven't, Google it, YouTube it, check it out. I think it's fantastic. In this instance, Dove, which doesn't have access to athletes, heroes young girls. And it talks about how times are tough for them as growing athletes. And in this case, they talk about something quite concerning. By the age of 14, 45% of girls will drop out of sports for a variety of reasons, one being body image. I'd love for you to hear from this young girl now.
Because I had a friend who really liked swimming. She did it like competitively and she did comps and things. But like, she just got so insecure with her body in a swimsuit to the point where she just wouldn't do it anymore because of that. And she just really couldn't do it. And she had to quit something that she really loved because of how like normalized certain body types were.
This is just one example. I'm sure there's so many more, but unless we ask the question and understand why, what, how, we're never going to be able to plug this gap. And so it's important not to only listen to their dreams, but also to their concerns. So Sean mentioned earlier that the latest Gen Alpha is going to be born this year, but the first one was born 2010. They're turning 14. And if we think about this, we're at that tipping point where boys and girls are going to stop participating in sports as much as they used to. And not only that, girls are going to face 2 walls. They're going to feel peer pressure and puberty. Now, again, for a sports brand, it's really important to be front and center with this conversation and ask the question, why? What's going on? What's changing? Otherwise, we're going to lose them for the next decade. Yes, you come back, you play running, you play football again, or you train in the gym, but we can't lose you. So it's really important to understand the why. Now, the last example, an incredibly iconic moment. How many of you remember this moment? Yes, amazing. This is so powerful because we start with Mbappe, but we pivot to Chloe. Why? 3 reasons. And Gen Alpha, our future athletes, are inspired by this, they're empowered by this, and they see the expression. Why are they empowered? Because girls and boys can truly, spontaneously, and boldly celebrate their achievements in sport or in any space they choose. Their expression, because girls, like boys, can unabashedly celebrate. And the third is inspiration. Girls need more role models, and boys need female role models. And this is what we get to see as we promote female sports, because they're not a charity. I love that quote. Not a charity. They're athletes, and they're here to stay, and it's only going to grow. So as we kind of wrap up, it's really important to understand, as brands, how do we listen to Gen Alpha, those future athletes, or as you mentioned, those fearless honey badgers? Because they're the future. They're going to be the largest generation. If we don't listen, we're going to miss something. So asking more questions than giving them answers. And so as we part, there's something I'd love to share with you that I hope connects with you in an authentic way.
يلا.
So good it is season way.
تبين تلعبين؟ يلا.
Hello. Let's do that microphone. Thank you so much for listening, guys. We are offering you a unique chance to ask our community anything. So if you scan that QR code and enter a burning question for your brand for Gen Alpha, one of our team will reach out to you to give you some more information. And yeah, again, I guess the key message that we wanted you to take away today was we think kids are misunderstood. If you listen to them, you might learn something. It's important to listen to them because they have influence. And yeah, by doing so, you can better connect with them and maybe change the world for the better. Thanks. Any questions?
Do you have any questions?
That was easy.
That was easy indeed. Nice one. Mic drop. Well, no?
In terms of partner selection, how important is it that kids and Gen Alpha are part of the cohort that you're basically evaluating for selecting those partners? And how do you go about identifying whether those exist or not?
Partners in terms of athletes, federations,
Athletes, yep.
That's a great question. So the short answer is it plays a big piece. I think if you think about it, one, performance on pitch or on court is super important, right? So I think as long as they're performing and they're truly leading by example, I think that's paramount. I think the second is it's also upping our game in women's, right? So it's great to have male athletes, but how do we also have that fair, equal representation so we have role models in both? I think the third is it's a matter of making sure, knowing that social platforms are growing, is what image, what perception are they giving? Are they truly authentic on and off the pitch? So they're all factored in, and it's a matter of making sure that it really does hold true to the brand values.
Thank you.
That's it. Oh.
Hi. I'm particularly interested in the negative trend on the next generation that's kind of spiking around this time. Have you compared that with previous generations? As a millennial, I knew a lot of the hate that millennials got when we were coming up. Gen Z, kind of the same thing. So is this part of a kind of a natural cycle that we have against the upcoming generation?
I would say absolutely, yeah. So in terms of tracking it, like what we've done, so we do speak to kind of the younger cohort of Gen Z. So we've got kind of like 14 to 18-year-olds. And what we have done is ask kids before, you know, what do you think about the generation either side? Like, what do you think of your millennial parents and stuff like that? But I've seen a lot going around recently, like, you know, in the 1920s, it was like, oh, those children are out there doing this. And like, it comes around every generation. But I think, yeah, we just want to really like reiterate the message of just, you know, listening to kids. They do have something to say. Remember what it was like when you were that age. And yeah, you might learn something.
Thank you.
Any more?
Hi, thank you very much. Very interesting. In your general, Sian, for you, this would really, both of you actually, in your general research, can you tell us about some of the most surprising things that you've heard from Gen Alpha? I mean, for instance, I was at a conference recently and there was a lot of discussion about not exactly a backlash against digital, but a desire, partly because of the way they've seen their parents be kind of consumed or subsumed by their technology and their devices and having their kind of home life eroded by it. So they were talking a lot about this huge desire for physical spaces and those kinds of things, which was quite surprising to a lot of people. Anything like that, or anything you didn't expect to hear from Gen Alpha?
I think so. We've just recently done a report in Q1, and one of the things that came out of that was what shocked me. I'm not going to remember the stat off my head, but it was significant enough for me to go, oh, that's interesting. Was that kids are saying that they learn more online than they do in classrooms. So there is this idea, like, I think one of the problems with tech and like digital is everyone's quick to kind of go to the negative impacts that it has, but actually kids are using it for learning. And it was something that was definitely brought on by the pandemic. So kids had to find a new way of, I guess, like self-learning from home, and they were doing that online through their devices. And one of the challenges that they found going back into school is that that environment now is super distracting. So they're really struggling, I guess, to fit back into that education system in the same way that they were learning before. So yeah, I guess like my take on that would be kind of the flip side of like the negative impact of digital, and actually thinking about how kids are using it as a tool for education, and it's not kind of all bad. Yeah.
Cool.
I'll give you two. One is I think about what's happening with Marcus Rashford right now. He's had a tough year, and I think him going off social media is almost just like, hey, let me come off and let me actually give myself time and space. And I think that's something that Gen Alpha would appreciate. Another example is my nephew. He still will use YouTube and Instagram to actually look at videos of Mamba mentality of Kobe. And I would think, how does that happen given that where Kobe is and where he was? And so that inspires me. So I think it's just a matter of, and the third one actually, going back to the research that KKB did on Killian, arrogance was appreciated by the French consumer, but not by the British, the German, and the Italian, right? And that surprised me because in my head, I'm like, well, isn't arrogance good? Because it's confidence, but there's a difference there that they're already perceiving as different. So yeah, there's so many insights. When you ask the question, we may see it as one way, but they see it as another. Thank you.